Hello, welcome to Evangelistic Apologetics. This is Dai-Qing Yuan, your host and teacher. This is an introduction to systematic Christian worldview. We are on part 1, the truth of truth and the theory of creation. The idea is that we discuss what is truth, find out what is the standard for the truth, and then we evaluate the theory of creation on whether or not it can be the truth. Now, we are on the third part of this, C, but the idea starts from here. We studied philosophy because you want to love wisdom, right? That's philosophy, philo, loving, sophy, wisdom. And the philosophy is how to think, and it involves answering 4 basic questions. Epistemology is answering, how do I know? And the metaphysics is answering, what is there? Ethics is, what should I do? And the categorical philosophy is, why do I do this? If you can answer all of these questions, you have a good philosophy. Otherwise, you're still trying to form it. And we have found out that truth is best defined as the accurate reflection of the objective world in the subjective world. So what is true reflects accurately what is real. And the real thing exists in the objective world, and it has 3 layers. It has natural things, the human things, and the supernatural things. And we get to know them through experience, reason, and faith, primarily. And as a result, we have science, philosophy, and theology, respectively. While the existence and the nature of the supernatural world is a very speculative thing, the best way to find your theology is to utilize your reason and your experience. And therefore, science and philosophy can be used to form your theology. And that's what we are doing. So we are doing the arguments for the existence of God. That is basically using science and philosophy to help you form a rational, reasonable belief by faith. But that's your theology. The theology is primarily by belief, but it conforms with the best of philosophy and science. Don't we want to have a theology like that? All right, that's what we're doing. We have done the first of the traditional arguments for the existence of God, which is called the cosmological argument, or argument from creation. Now that argument goes like that. Everything that has a beginning seems to have creator or creators. And the universe has a beginning. Therefore, the universe should have a creator. That is defined as God. Okay. Now, we found out this argument actually involves quite a bit of variation and shades and shadows. And the doubts on that usually is either on the first premise, everything that has a beginning should have a beginning, should have a creator. Well, we know that we reached by induction. Before we find any counter-arguments, the inducted result should be held, and we haven't found any. Somebody said, well, maybe the universe. Well, the universe is something you're studying. You don't know. Okay? Unless you really know something that has a beginning and has no creator, then you don't have a counter-argument. But by real life, everything that has a beginning has a creator. So the first premise should be held simply by the normal way of human reasoning. The second premise, the universe has a beginning, that really is a quotation of authority. Okay? You quote the best of scientists today that the universe seems to be expanding and it has a beginning. Some people may say, well, the universe, for a while people believed that the Newtonian physics believed in absolute space-time, and it supports a steady-state universe, and it supports deism, maybe. Okay? And so maybe God created the heaven and earth and let it go. It just runs like a clock. So maybe God does not involve with the world. Or maybe the universe is eternal, then there's no need for God. So atheism really found its first possibility from the Newtonian physics. However, we understand science is never final. Science progresses. And now we know that Newtonian physics has progressed. And for high-speed situation, near the speed of light, it is wanting. So it is now supplemented, I will not say replaced, by relativity, theory of relativity. And theory of relativity supports relative space-time and an expanding universe. And if that's the case, there's an expanding universe, there should be a beginning, and what about the beginning? What about before the beginning? See, that supports theism. If the universe has a beginning, it should have a creator, and that supports theism. For people that still want to hold on to steady-state universe, well, their science has not been convincing these days, and if they want to hold on to it, that's fine, but understand that that is nothing but an opinion that is kind of counter to the best of scientific evidences. And in that case, the theology that it supports, the deism, would be wanting in its support. Okay? So if science progresses, the philosophy and theology that are related with them should also progress. So I would say today, by the best of science today, the expanding universe for science, the relative space-time for philosophy, and the theism for theology is the most reasonable conclusion for thinking people. Okay? Otherwise, you have to do gymnastics and be really stretching the evidence. So that is our review. And now we are going to second argument, second of all of the traditional argument for the existence of God. And this one is called the argument from design, which is also called teleological argument. Okay? Telos is the end. So that means there is an end, there is a purpose, there is a something to reach for. So argument from design means that the universe seems to have a design and there's a purpose for it. Okay? That's why it's called teleological argument. And the argument goes like this, also in the form of simple syllogism. The first premise said, everything with order seems to have a designer. Everything with order seems to have a designer. And the second premise says, the universe has order. And conclusion, the universe should have a designer, which is God. Okay? Simple three-step argument of syllogism. Now, how do we get to the first premise? Everything with order seems to have a designer. Well, like in the first argument, we do induction. We observe as people who are created with eyes and with mind. We observe first. We look at the world. Just see anything that has order. Look at my tie. It has order. It has these dots. And these dots seems to have a pattern on it. Do you think they are spattered on there by cooking? You mean by stir-frying Chinese food? I don't think so. First of all, this is made in Italy. So, and it's beautiful. It's so well patterned, it is not random. And it is not likely that it came by itself. Right? And if you're wearing shirts that have stripes, and I find that most of your shirts, the stripes tend to be vertical today. Why? Well, because that lengthen your body, make you look slimmer. And you think that is a purposefully designed thing? Because most people today are overweight, so we don't want to stretch our body, look wider. We want to look slimmer, you see. And you look at everything that has pattern and that has an order. You can always trade to a designer. You see, my tie has a designer. Your shirt has a designer. Okay? Your room arranged in a certain way has a designer. Okay? And then you go to nature where you're not sure, but from the things you are sure, you extend to the things that you're not sure. Okay? So you look into nature, you find things that has a pattern, and then naturally you should think, well, it might has a designer too. So that goes to the second premise. Okay, first premise is by induction. It has never found a sure counter argument. So we should hold that until we find an argument, but we haven't. Okay, so the second step is universe has order. Well, that seems to be a given, right? What are scientists doing? Trying to find orders in the universe, right? And what do the scientists do when they find the order? Well, they publish it, and they have laws of physics named after them. And after that, what do other people do? Well, the people in the technological world, they will utilize these laws, this order, and they will make things and cause to create things that didn't exist before. I mean, change the combination to make things that were useless become useful. So the technology when you make useless things useful, you create wealth. And then when you create wealth, and if somebody is good at doing one thing, somebody is good at doing another, what do? They trade. Somebody is good in making paper, somebody is good in making pencil, and when do you trade? When they trade, doing free trade, okay, not force. When they freely trade, everybody gets better. Everybody's wealth increases, everybody can do things they could never have done before. You see, that's how wealth is created, that's how the civilization progresses, and that's how the world moves forward. See, and it all starts from observation of the world, then reasoning, then extracting laws and trying to verify it by experiment. Once you verify it, then you can utilize. Then they go to technological world, then they go to economic and business, and then everybody's life. You see, that's how the world runs. So the universe has order. That seems to be a given. And I have studied science for 15 years, for physics for 15 years, from undergraduate, and graduate studies, and then PhD, and all the ways. I am amazed at the orderliness of the universe. And in the realm of physics, and all of this universe seems to have been governed by 4 kinds of forces. Okay? Gravity, electromagnetism, strong interaction, and weak interaction. And right now, the best of theoretical physics seems to be able to unite the latter 3 forces: electromagnetism, strong interaction in the nuclear, and weak interaction with neutrinos, etc. And what we are able to unite the latter 3. With gravity, not yet, but we're still studying it. It's possible that everything, all of the beings can be governed just by one kind of law. And how can the physical world has correspondence with mathematics? Have you ever thought about that? You know, where does mathematics start from? Numbers, shape, they all start from human mind, right? And how come our things that come from our mind correspond with things that's outside of our mind in the real world? Okay, how come they correspond? Wouldn't that lead us to think about there may be a creator and designer that created both? Like God, who gave his image to us, he used his mind to create the world. He gave his mind partially to us so that our mind can understand the world. That the mathematics generated from our mind has correspondence with the patterns in the physical world. That makes you think. That once there was a physicist, I forgot his name, but he wrote a book titled something like the unreasonable correspondence between mathematics and physics. Because there's no reason that they have to, but they do. And why? That makes you think, right? So here, again, the universe has order, and there's no argument around it. And scientists are finding it. Technicians are utilizing it, and you are utilizing it. So if the universe has order, does not make you think that where does order come from? Does order generate by itself? There's a law called second law of thermodynamics, okay, which says that in any closed system, okay, that the entropy, that is the measure of disorder, only increases with time. Okay? Entropy increases with time in closed system. And if you think the universe is totally closed, there's no God, it's a closed system, then the entropy will increase, order should decrease, right, with time. And therefore, order does not arrive by itself, and the universe gets more complex. If somewhere gets more complex, somewhere else must get much less complex in order to make total entropy increase. Okay? And by the way, that kind of fluctuation is also unstable, and usually it is stable. So order does not come by itself. But the fact that the universe has order now does not point to there is a time when it has more order, and where does the first order come from? If the universe has a beginning, where does the order come from in the beginning? Wouldn't that lead you to think there must be a designer, like everything else that has order has designer, right? And if you have studied anything about science and technology, you have written any paper, you would never think that a monkey jumping on your keyboard would type out your paper. Okay? Because that's random. And if you have used any intelligence, which I believe you have, otherwise you wouldn't be listening now. If you have any intelligence, you would think these orders don't come by themselves. Okay? They came from a designer. So what is the designer of the universe that gave the initial order, which is the highest order, to the universe in the beginning of the universe, since the universe does have a beginning? That must be the designer, and designer naturally is the creator. It's the same, okay? And that is God. So this is the teleological argument, or the argument of design, about design, okay? And anybody who have studied science or technology, this seems to work with them best. And now, we are getting into the third argument. Okay, let me write down, summarize the argument. The argument from design is saying that everything with order seems to have a designer. And two is that the universe has order. Therefore, the universe should have a designer, which is God. All right, that's very simple. Right? And now we are going to the premise 1, premise 2, and then the conclusion. Okay? So that's how the argument goes. Now let's go to the third. traditional argument is called the argument from morality, or from morals. Okay, and this is called axiological argument. Axis, it means value or value standard. Axiological argument. Okay, this argument says like this: that premise one, that it seems that all moral beings come from moral beings. Okay, all moral beings seem to come from moral beings. Okay, and the premise 2 says that man is a moral being. And well, therefore the conclusion says man should come from a moral being. Should come from a moral being, which is God. Okay. Now, the story behind this is like this. The argument, the cosmological argument, which is also the argument from creation, and the teleological argument, the argument from design, they have been there for a long, long time. Okay, and from the early Christian apologists in the 2nd, 3rd century, they have started various form, and in the Middle Ages, Thomas Aquinas made them really advanced and became famous. And in the modern times, Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, he kind of disagreed with the first 2 arguments, and he did not believe it, but he said, "What, I have an argument that works." So he proposed the 3rd one. It's Immanuel Kant's. Kind of hard to believe. Kant, who has a lot to do with modernity and atheism, but he was a believer himself. At least at the end of his life, he became a true believer of Jesus Christ. But he proposed this, and it says all moral beings seems to come from moral beings. Well, who do you know are the moral beings in the world? Are animals moral? I don't think they know anything about good and evil. Somebody may say, "Oh, my dog is the most moral being, is the most faithful." Well, yes, he loves you, but the dogs do it by nature. He can't tell good and evil. Okay, and can bad man, evil man, have good dogs? Well, if the good dogs is defined as being loyal to the master, yeah, evil people can have good dogs. Can they tell if their master is good and evil? No, they can't. Right? So, dogs' morality is really what you project onto it. But animals are amoral. They are not immoral because they are amoral. There is no moral requirements on them. The only being that we know are human beings that are moral. We have a sense of good and evil. Well, of course, there's God and there's angels. But that's supernatural, what we're talking about in the visible world. So, where do human beings come from? They come from our parents. Where do our moral come from? Well, it comes from our parents' teaching, it comes from the society's influence, all right? But where do the society's moral come from? Well, from their predecessors. So overall, everybody's moral comes from either directly from previous generation, or indirectly, but still from previous generation. And then you go all the way till the first human parents, a human couple, because the universe has a beginning. Again, that's why the first argument must be presented first. The universe has a beginning. So the universe has order. There must be a initial maximum order design. And the people have moral. And then you go to the first couple, first parent, Adam and Eve. And where does their moral come from? Well, if the pattern holds, since we don't know any counter-argument yet, their moral should come from a moral being that created them, their creator and designer, kind of like their parents. And that should be God, right? Since human beings have moral standards, and that's the second premise. That seems to be a given too. I mean, even evil people have their morals. You know, a mafia's moral standard is that you don't snip, you don't tell, you don't snitch, right? That's the word, yes. And if you do that, that's worse than murder. Okay, they can murder, but they don't snitch. Okay, so everybody has their moral standard. Agreeing with the Bible or not is another thing, but people are moral beings. Okay, and then you go to the first person. Their moral should come from their creator and designer and educator, and that's God. Okay, so the conclusion is that human should have come from a moral being, and that moral being is God. And this can explain why human beings are different from the other animals. Okay? We have an ability to know good and evil. And where does it come from? Well, if you know the Bible, then you know there is a beginning, there's a creation, and our Creator is a moral being. He is holy, He's righteous, and He's just. And He is loving, and He is merciful, and He's forgiving. And all of those things, the moral attributes of God through the creation of human beings in God's image, the ability to know moral standards, to know good and evil, come into human beings. Okay? And that can explain humanity's special position in the universe. Okay? Without believing there's a God, you can't explain why the human moral come from. If we just evolve from animals, well, the things that come later usually you don't have things that is not there, okay? Because you have to have a source. Everything has a beginning, have a source, and the source of our morality must be God. So what do we have now? We have three arguments for the existence of God, right? From creation, because the universe has a beginning, there must be a creator, and from order, the initial order must be from the designer, which is God. And from moral, we have moral, and you go to the first couple, and where did their moral come from? From God. So there are three things pointing to one being. There must be a God. So it's for His glory we learn. Amen.